Afternoon. This is Dr. Craig Stern of Pharma Pharmaceutical Consultants and ProData Analytics. I'm delighted to have a few minutes to talk to you. We're going to talk today about quality, and one of the reasons I'm doing that is that in the latest news out, there's multiple concerns and discussions about canceling the Affordable Care Act and issues with regard to canceling Medicare, and a host of things coming out of Congress as well as the president-elect. And so I want to talk about a few of the consequence issues so that we can address that. Let me start with the fact that if the Affordable Care Act is canceled, whether it's because they cancel funding or otherwise, then a significant amount of the issue with regard to choice of healthcare is going to fall on the consumer, and it's going to fall on health plans trying to identify options for consumers. Now, Republicans have long talked about selling insurance across states and in an effort to try and induce competition. And should those kind of issues come up, then people are going to have more choices. They may not be local to a given state, and there may not be some issues where those particular health plans have to meet the requirements of the departments of insurance of those states, or maybe they will. But either way, there will be a lot of choice issues, and so more of the choice falls on an individual in order to make up their mind. Now, one of the main issues, of course, will be cost, no question about it. But the other issue we'll have to deal with, if I choose and I pick a less expensive plan, am I still getting quality and the kind of quality that I expect? On the other hand, if I pick a more expensive plan, can I be assured that I'm getting all the value out of a more expensive plan versus the less expensive plan? There have been multiple programs out there in order to deal with what goes on with regard to quality. And I want to try and keep this separate because everybody's going to have to deal with, is this a quality plan and am I willing to pay for it, etc. There are two kinds of quality in a very broad way of talking about it. One is a Donabadian model that has to deal with performance. Are people answering the phone? Are you spending a lot of time on a gurney? Are you getting nurses to come in and see you? And drugs, what about the waiting line at the pharmacy in order to get your prescription? Things like that. On the other side is clinical quality. And clinical quality has to deal with whether, if you're taking a medication, let's say for blood pressure, did your blood pressure come down into normal ranges? If you're diabetic, then did your hemoglobin A1C come down to normal ranges? As well as preventive measures. Are you losing weight? Are you getting exercise? Are you moving away from a sedentary lifestyle of sitting, watching TV, or sitting and not moving to one where you're taking walks or runs or things like that? All of those are part of quality measures. Now, there have been quality measures around in healthcare for some time, but they're all not applicable to what we're talking about. For example, the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Hospitals, known as JCAHO, has been doing this for hospitals for a very long time. And they look at many of the bookkeeping, performance, and some clinical issues, but really focused on dealing with basic issues that deal with oversight, antibiotic oversight in a hospital, things like that. When health plans came to the fore, we had the NCQA, or National Quality Alliance, that had their HEDIS measures. And these HEDIS measures are for every health plan that is dealing with billing for Medicare and Medicaid services, but especially Medicare, in order to deal with quality, and were people holding to quality measures. And there's a host of HEDIS measures that one does in order to identify whether a health plan is doing it. And they do it about every 3 years, and many of these HEDIS measures are frequently published. Over the last several years, there's also been something known as a 5-star rating. And the 5-star rating was something that people were looking at, especially with regard to the Affordable Care Act, where it was a number from 0 to 5, but notably 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. And over time, there was a move to ensure that all health plans had a minimum of 3 stars before they could bill for Medicare services, but also as a signal to the community that quality was being done, and it was being done in a reasonable fashion. Each of the 5 stars has a particular indication, but they deal with things like compliance with medications. They deal with things with comprehensive medication reviews from a pharmacy standpoint. They deal with issues with regard to quality that has been defined by each of the organizations that represent physicians, nurses, pharmacy, etc. And so each of them has given parameters. Many of them are not used. Some of them are used, and it changes almost on a yearly basis where things are being added or other things are being subtracted. The current issue is that if a program is going to participate in the program as it exists today, then they have to have at least 3 stars, and anyone with 1 or 2 stars that hasn't shown any improvement effectively can be dropped. Well, this whole issue of quality really focuses on something that has always been a debate within healthcare, and that is you can't define quality because there's too many measures. You can't tell one population versus another. One group is sicker than another. One group has more services than another, and so it's too hard to address. But what has been done, and we as analysts have done it extensively, is to say, well, what are the national standards, and how does the experience of what a particular group is doing in comparison to national standard, and then separately to take a standard for what's going on in the community or a particular employer or a particular plan, and how is the performance going with that particular plan. And the benefit of this from an analytical standpoint is you can measure it. You can measure the difference of the performance versus what the standard is. You can identify that as quality. You can measure the cost of it. And then if you improve it, meaning you decrease the variance between those two numbers, or the differences between those two numbers, then you have the capability of saying, well, you have improved the quality, there's less variance, you have reduced the cost, so you have something that you can address. And we, as analysts, have been doing this for years and had a lot of experience with it. Well, so have others. So, I mean, this isn't just one group that has looked at something and done it, but clearly quality does have some characteristics. It may not cover everything, and clearly depending on the specialty, depending on the overall population, there are going to be different numbers and people that are going to address that. But at the end of the day, on quality, it's not based on a very complicated case in cardiology or oncology, etc. It has to deal with what's going on with the general population and how are you dealing with the general population and improving their care. That's critical, and that's where a good deal of these measures occur. Well, the other option here is that the Congress has talked about removing Medicare entirely and moving it to a tax credit kind of issue or something other than it is, presumably due to cost. There's arguments about that, where the current system with the Affordable Care Act has increased the life of it probably by about a dozen years. By the same token, others are saying, no, it's too expensive and we have to put it on tax credit. Whatever happens here is one where more of the decision making will go to the individual or group of individuals that are buying insurance. So it isn't just the individual or more to employers or otherwise. It goes to the fact that more of this decision will be made. One of the decisions will clearly be cost, and the other one will have to deal with quality. And the indicators I'm talking about are there, and more importantly, they're published. So a person can go on the net and find out what HEDIS scores are, what the 5-star rating scores are, see how a plan or otherwise has participated in it. However, there has not been a huge amount of data about individual practitioners. So what I've talked about has to deal with hospitals for the JCAHO indicators or 5-star for health plans. But in various states over many years, there have been indicators to identify where physicians have participated and what their individual numbers are. So effectively, a physician report card has been published in Florida and Minnesota and California and others. And clearly that will come for hospitals, pharmacies, and everyone else. And these numbers already exist for hospitals. The emphasis here and the point that I want to make is that as the politics changes and as we begin to change what goes on with our choices, more and more of that is dribbling down to the individual, to the employer, etc. And we have to be very aware of the fact that it is certainly a cost decision, but it's also a quality decision based on what our needs are within our community. These kind of things make sense. They make issues that we have to think about, and we all have to address it. I'd like to let you know that next week will be our last show of the year. We will be presenting for the last of our year, and next year we'll be moving this over to Pharma and continuing with what we're doing. We look forward to talking to you next week about issues, and certainly about common issues as well as underlying issues that we need to address. I encourage you to take a look at our RX InfoX, our info exchange. That's at www.propharmaconsultants.com/RxInfoX.html. That will keep you up to date on news and what's going on, and certainly will link you to this Facebook Live and other information. We look forward to talking to you next week. For everyone, have a wonderful holiday, a happy and a healthy holiday, and hopefully one that you get together with family and enjoy each other. Be well and have a great week.